Well, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight, especially to all of our Hills members, but also friends of members that have just been given a link tonight. If you've been around our place at all lately, you know that our senior teaching minister, Rick Atchley, has been teaching a series called Keep Calm and really talking about anxiety. And so my name's David. I'm one of the ministers here. It's just going to be a great opportunity to have a conversation with somebody that I love and respect a lot, Stephanie Hunter, who is in our counseling and wellness ministry. And she is a clinical social worker. And so she has a lot of chops that she brings to this conversation. In fact, I'm the dad of a 12-year-old, and there's times that I call Stephanie and go, hey, we just need some help. And so I'm excited that you get to kind of experience that this evening. If you've been a part of this series, you know that it's been built around Philippians 4:6 that says, don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything and tell God what you need and thank him for all that he's done. And Rick's done a great job of saying, hey, when you're anxious, Stephanie, it's not that you're committing a sin in that moment. I mean, Jesus knows that we're going to have anxious moments, but just kind of leading us out in that he doesn't want us to live an anxious life. But terms and definitions are important. So just from your perspective, what drives anxiety? What feeds into that, and how would you respond to that?
Well, I think right now the way that I would answer that question is our life is just really, really crazy. Everything is just coming at us in so many different ways. I mean, with pandemic and everything that we're dealing with and all the different things that are happening, it's like we have compounded stress over and over, all these different things piling up. And then along with that, we have so many unknowns, and anxiety is living in the unknown. It's like, what is going to happen? What if this happens? What if that happens? And when we live in the unknown, that is where fear and anxiety just skyrockets. And I think it's just really important to recognize, first of all, we're just dealing with a lot. Our world is just dealing with a crazy amount of stuff. We've got COVID and all the things that COVID brings, the scariness of the disease, mask, no mask, vaccine, no vaccine, all the different things that have come with it. We have dealt with school having to be remote and kids having to adjust. I mean, we were just talking about how David's daughter is just now starting back in-person school, and just all the different things that kids are having to face right now. There's just so many different things. And then grief. There is so much grief that we are facing right now. There's so many losses. There have been losses of loved ones because of COVID and all the different things that have transpired during this year. But then you also have just the losses of experiences, losses of not getting to go to your graduation, losses of family events and birthday parties and all those different things. So there's grief there. And then that drives up stress, and then that can create more anxiety. And then there's all the unknowns in the grief. Is something more going to happen? Am I going to lose any more? How am I going to get through all these things? And all of those unknowns cause us for the anxiety to keep going up. Then we have all the political and racial things going on. There's just so many things where our families and friends are debating and are at odds with each other, and it's just this constant barrage of just conflict and debate, and that also drives it up. And so we have all these different things happening, and then we have this place of hypervigilance that we're having to live in right now because of all the different things that are going on. We're being forced to constantly pay attention to everything. God gives us that ability to be hypervigilant, to protect us in danger. But when we're having to be hypervigilant all the time, constantly paying attention to germs and washing your hands and how to handle these situations and political issues and racial issues and isolation and all these different things, again, it just overwhelms us. And then there's the isolation. And I think that has been one of the hardest things to watch people go through. I know I've experienced it in my own life. We've all experienced. When you're going through stress, you need people, you need connection. And God created us for connection. God created us for relationships. God created us to have that support system. And the hardest thing about this year, on top of all the other things that we have had to deal with, is that we've had the isolation, and the things that we need to help us through those things have been taken from us. And so we can't lean on the people. We can't go hang out with the family. Maybe your kids don't get to go to their different social events where they get the support and the help and just the energy that they need of just getting through this time. And so when you add all these different things together, it's just so much. And then there's one other thing that we're going to talk about later, but also just our perspective, the way we look at all these things, the way we process all these things, that drives anxiety as well. And so I just think it's just we have to recognize that there is a lot going on. It's like we're in a pressure cooker right now. And if you're feeling stressed, if you're feeling overwhelmed, you're like everybody else out there. And it's just a lot. And we just need to recognize there's just so much that we're dealing with right now.
I think one of the things that just listening to you makes me just kind of sigh. I don't know about all y'all out there, but just that even though as abnormal as the times are, there's a normalcy that it would make us anxious in this moment. And I just, that helps to just know that, man, it's just hard right now. You know, one of the things that Rick was talking about this past weekend was just how this is impacting our children.
Yes.
Our teens, our kiddos, and just, you know, him not having just the time to be able to go into all that. But in all honesty, you're better qualified to even speak to that. So, you know, thank you for being here tonight. And I guess that question in that lane that I would ask first is just, how can we recognize anxiety in our kiddos?
You know, well, first of all, I would say that pretty much everybody that I am interacting with these days is struggling to some extent. I mean, there is a spectrum of how much we're being affected and how much our kids are being affected, and there's a lot of dynamics that play into it. But I can pretty much guarantee that to some extent, our kids are dealing with anxiety across the board because there's just so much. Our kids are having to process so many things. And as adults, it's hard for us, but as kids who are looking at the adults and trying to make sense of everything and don't necessarily have all the life experience, it's very possible that pretty much every kid out there is struggling to some extent. And I think but some of the signs that you want to look for, though, is looking for kids who are shutting down, kids who are withdrawing from just their normal thing, that are pulling away. When you see your child pulling away where they maybe don't want to do the things that they used to do, or they're pulling away from spending time with friends or family, or they don't want to go play sports like they did before, or you just see them kind of shutting down, you know, that could be a sign. Another thing is just being more angry and irritable, where everything seems to be getting to them, where it's just things that wouldn't have bothered them in the past are now they're exploding and upset over things. That just means they're just on edge right now. And along with that, crying. If they're crying all the time, if you find them, you know, they've never been someone to cry, and all of a sudden they're just crying about things that you wouldn't think would bother them, that's another sign. Not managing tasks well. If they are struggling with school or not getting their homework done, or doing chores or things that they normally would have been able to manage just fine, and all of a sudden they just can't seem to keep up with stuff. They just seem easily overwhelmed. Maybe dropping grades in school. And of course, with everything going on with COVID, it's hard to know if their grades dropping is because of anxiety or if it's just because of the dynamics of the way school is right now. But either way, if all of a sudden your kids' grades are dropping, it is definitely something to look at and just pay attention to. Another thing is hygiene. If your child is not caring what they look like, if they don't want to take baths anymore, if they don't want to brush their hair, they just don't really care anymore. If they just show the sign that they just don't care, that's another sign that they are stressed out and maybe feeling overwhelmed. Another thing is sleep issues. And this can be avoiding going to sleep. Kids who will do everything in their power to keep from having to go to sleep. Maybe having trouble staying asleep. Or you have kids that complain of nightmares all the time and they're anxious about going to bed. And if these things are happening, then that's a sign that they're really struggling. A change in eating, or maybe they're eating too much, or maybe they're not ever wanting to eat at all. And then complaining of physical symptoms. You know, having stomach aches, having headaches, complaining of their heart racing, panic attacks. All those different things are signs that that they may be dealing with some anxiety issues. But one thing that I would just encourage everybody to do is ask your kids. Just ask them, how are you doing? Are you struggling? What's going on? How do you feel like you're handling school right now? How do you feel like things are going with your friends? Just ask them. But one of the things that I find is that sometimes kids, maybe they don't know how to verbalize what's going on and what they're struggling with. And so a really easy tool you could use is use a scale. Like say on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being great and 10 being horrible, how are you feeling right now about how school is going? And then if they give you an 8, then you know they're pretty stressed out about school. Maybe they don't know how to say it, but that 8 gives you a good indication that they're maybe not coping well and that they need some support. So whatever you do, just dialogue with your kids. Ask them the questions. Let them tell you how they're doing. If you can't see the signs, just ask them. Make it normal to have these dialogues on a daily basis and let them let you know how they're doing.
That's all so good, Stephanie, and just practical for us as parents to be able to see in our kiddos. And just, hey, as you're hearing some of the questions that are being asked and how Stephanie's responding, if there's something that you want to ask, feel free to send that in on the chat, and we won't be able to answer all the questions, but hopefully at the end we'll have time for a question or two. So we would just love for you to be a part of this conversation too. So you talked about, Stephanie, of ways that we can identify that our kids are struggling and that anxiety is present. If we see that, how do we help? What are some practical tools of how we can help our students?
Sure. Well, I think one thing is, first of all, just know that our kids don't necessarily know how to navigate these times. We're struggling as adults, but I can guarantee you as kids, they don't know. They don't have the life experience and they don't necessarily have the tools. And so don't assume that they are going to do what's best for them. And so you're going to have to equip them. And one of the things that is really helpful for kids is routine. Everything is so crazy right now. There are so many unknowns, and there's so much monotony in our life right now in the way that we're living and the way we're having to go through it. And sometimes it's easy to just give up on the routines. And I think having routines so that kids know what to expect, that helps a lot. Because like I said before, anxiety is a lot about living in the unknown. And if you have a routine and you know what's coming, that helps calm some of that anxiety that you might experience. Another thing is self-care. When we think about self-care, that sleep, diet, and exercise, anytime someone comes to see me and they're talking about struggling with anxiety or depression or stress, those are some of the first things I ask people is, how is your sleeping, how is your diet, and how is your exercise? Our kids need those things. They need good sleep. They need good, healthy diets. And they need to be getting outside, running around, screaming, getting their energy out. They need that. Their bodies need that. Their nervous systems need that. And so make sure that they are doing things that are taking care of their bodies. But another thing that I would encourage you to do is ask your kids and brainstorm with your kids just the idea of self-care and what are some things that they enjoy doing? What are some things that help them relieve stress? Is it going outside and playing basketball? Is it dancing to music? Is it singing? Is it calling their friends? Help them figure out what are some things that help them de-stress, and then encourage them to find ways to do those things. And when they're having one of those hard moments, encourage them of how can you reach out to your friend. Why don't you go play basketball and get some of that energy out? So help them buy into the idea that they need to do things to take care of themselves so that they can be mindful of making healthy choices for themselves. Engaging in family life. I think this is really important. I think a lot of times we as families, we're just going and doing, and we're not necessarily spending quality time with each other. Because of COVID, I think we're spending quantity time together, but it's not necessarily quality. And I would encourage you to put the electronics away, turn the TV off, and find ways to engage your kids where you are looking at each other, where you're talking to each other, where you're laughing with each other, you're playing games, you're going for walks, you're going for bike rides. Do things where you are connecting with your children, because you connecting with your children is one of their coping tools. They need their parents. They need to feel connected to their kids, to their parents. They need to know that you are with them. And they need to learn how important it is to keep that connection, because it is so easy for us to disconnect from each other because of electronics, because of TV, and it's something we have to be intentional about doing.
So would you say, like at times, our students, they're not going to give us that positive feedback, and at times that all we're going to get is that we're an annoyance. But what I think I hear you saying is plow through that.
No, I think so. And, and talk to them about why it's important. And just that you're not trying to get in their business. You're not trying to be a pain, but you really are enjoying, you want to be with them. You want to enjoy your time with them. And even if kids push back and they have a great experience and play games and they're laughing, the thing is, they may still really enjoy it. They just don't want to tell you. Yeah. And it's still important. And that's the thing. Don't let kids decide what they need. You know that they need that connection. You know they need to be engaged with their family. So even if they're kind of resisting, push through and try to make it happen. But, make it happen in a way that they feel good about it. If it's a game they want to play or just do something that engages them, but together. And let them see the importance of that. And then also just making sure they're engaging in their healthy friendships. They need those friends. The thing is that kids grow and develop through socialization, and COVID has taken so much of that away from them. And so any chance that they have to connect with their friends, encourage it. Whenever one of my girls is, when they're struggling, and they're just feeling down, I encourage them, go call your friends, go FaceTime with your friends. Not necessarily texting, but actually engaging them, talking to them, laughing with them, doing things where you're engaging friends so you feel that you're connected and that you're not alone. And then the other thing that I think is really, really important is make it normal to ask how your kids are doing. Kind of like what I was saying before, the whole using the scale 1 to 10. Your kids need to know that they are seen, heard, and understood. And when kids are feeling stressed out and overwhelmed, and they need to talk about it, what we need to do as parents is to be present with them and listen to them and engage what they're saying and empathize with what they're saying. Because the thing is, when kids are overwhelmed with their emotions, they can very easily stall out where they are. They get stuck where they are. But when you listen to them, when you engage with what they're struggling with, when you empathize and validate where they are, you literally help move them forward and help them not be stuck where they are. And then what it does is it puts them in a position to be able to move and do something about the situation. And one of the ways that I like to explain this is a concept called red zone, green zone. It's based off a book by Tina Bryson and Dan Siegel called The Yes Brain. And the whole idea is when we are in an emotional place, when we're upset, when we're stressed, that is called the red zone. And what happens in the red zone is that we're in a very reactive place. That's like the kid in the grocery store who wants a cookie and mama won't buy him a cookie, so he's on the floor screaming and yelling. That would be a red zone moment. That's the parent who comes home from work, sees that their kids haven't done their chores, and grounds everybody for a year. That's a red zone moment. And the thing is, the red zone is when you are in a place where your emotions are driving your behavior. And what we're in right now would be called the green zone. The green zone is we're talking about hard situations, we're talking about emotional things, but our thought process, our rational thinking is guiding the conversation. So we're in a position to problem solve and to make decisions in rational ways. So when you think about the red zone, think of the red zone as a reactive place. Think about the green zone as a proactive place. So when our kids are really stressed out and overwhelmed, they're in that red zone. And one of the greatest tools that you have from getting your kids in the red zone down to the green zone is to use empathy. And empathy is just a powerful tool of just saying, you know what, I'm so sorry that things are so hard. I know that you were trying so hard. I know you were so frustrated. I know the situation is so unfair. And it is so frustrating for you. And I'm just so sorry of how hard it is. And I just want you to know that I care and I'm with you. When you say those things, when you use that empathy, you help them move forward in their emotions and you bring them down into the green zone. And the reason you want them in the green zone is because once they're down there, then now they're in a proactive, receptive place. And now you can say, so now what can we do about what you're struggling with? What are some things? How can we problem solve through this? And so what you want to do is when kids are stressed out and overwhelmed, I think a lot of times as parents, we jump into wanting to solve the problem. Yeah. You're stressed out, you're overwhelmed. So this is what you need to do. Well, the thing is, when we do that, our kids don't listen to us. They're not hearing us because the emotions are overwhelming them and they're stalling out in those emotions. And so what you do is connect with them in the emotions that they're dealing with, help them, support them, empathize with them, and then all of a sudden they come down to the green zone and now they're ready to talk. Now they're ready to deal with stuff. And it's just a really powerful way of getting how to look at your kids, look at them. Are they in the green zone or are they in the red zone? If they're in the red zone, utilize ways to support them and listen to them and be present with them. If they're in the green zone, use that time to problem solve and come up with ways to better their situation.
No, that's so good, Stephanie. And just, even listening to you about what some of the tools are and talking about that socialization, even Tim commented and said, hey, being able to come back to church has been able to help a lot. So that same kind of thing about being around peers and being around friends and so forth. But for just a moment, shift the conversation for a second. And you've been talking to parents, but talk to the teens for just a second, or even in this, parents can get language too. But when they have anxious thoughts or anxious feelings, how do they deal with that?
Sure. So this is something that I use whenever people come to see me. So if you've ever been in my office, you may have already heard this. But so we're going to talk about a guy named Bob, and Bob is driving on the freeway, and someone cuts him off in traffic. It's something he doesn't like, and he can't control it. And so the thing is that Bob thinks to himself, idiots, stupid people, I hate driving on this freeway, this is going to ruin my day, I can't handle this, it's too much. So if Bob's thinking all those things, how might Bob be feeling? Well, he's going to feel angry, he's going to feel irritated, he's going to feel defensive. So as Bob is angry, defensive, and irritated, how is he going to behave? Well, he might do road rage, he might yell and cuss out the driver beside him, he might go to work and yell at his boss. And so now let's reverse the situation and now say that Bob is driving in traffic, and this time someone cuts him off in traffic. And then this time he thinks to himself, it's okay. I'm thankful I'm okay. It was a mistake. I've made that mistake. I'm thankful I'm alive. It's all good. So if Bob's thinking that, how is he feeling now? Well, Bob's feeling calm. Maybe he's feeling thankful. Maybe he's feeling appreciative. So if Bob is feeling calm, grateful, and appreciative, how's he going to behave? Well, he's going to behave by maybe driving even more carefully than he was. Maybe he's going to call his wife and tell her that he loves her. Maybe he's going to go to work and do a great job because he's thankful to be there. And so a lot of times we think, Bob got cut off in traffic and it made him mad. Well, the thing is, Bob didn't get cut off in traffic and it caused him to be mad. Bob got cut off in traffic. He thought something about it. And what he thought about it told him to feel angry. And the thing that is important about that is if Bob got cut off in traffic and it made him angry, then that makes us believe that we're at the mercy of our circumstances. And that's a really overwhelming thing, because then you think every time Bob's going to get on the freeway, he's just going to be at the mercy of other drivers and whether or not he's going to be angry and have a bad day. But that's not the case. What Bob thought about it determined how he felt about it. And we have to understand that our thoughts are like the steering wheel, directing which way we're going. And so another way that I would like to give this as an example, we'll talk about David. So David, let's pretend we're going to say that your hair is blue.
Okay.
And you and I are going to think really, really hard that your hair is blue. And everybody who's watching, I want you to think that David's hair is blue. Okay. And we're all going to think it, we're all going to believe it, and we're going to believe that it is true. Well, then David's going to go look in the mirror, and he's going to tell us, no, my hair is indeed brown. And so the thing is, just because you think it doesn't make it true. And just because you think it doesn't make it right. And the thing is that we have to realize that thoughts are just thoughts. They're just thoughts. And they only have the power that we give them. And so it's just so important to recognize that, because your thoughts are not truth until truth becomes your thoughts.
Well, you better say that again.
So your thoughts are not truth until truth becomes your thoughts.
That's good.
So if you're going around thinking about, this is a disaster, I can't handle this, this is overwhelming, I don't know what I'm going to do. And if you believe that to be true, well, it's going to create despair really quickly. And if you start to feel despair, what are you going to do? You're just going to shut down. But if your thoughts are, this is challenging, it feels overwhelming, but I have a good support system, I have places to go to get help, I can get through this, I've been through hard times before, I can do this, then you might feel empowered. And in that feeling of empowerment, you're going to make good choices. And so the thing is that God tells us to take our thoughts captive. And why does he tell us to do that? Is because your thoughts need to be truth. If they're not truth, they're going to lead you astray. And so in Philippians 4, I'm just so glad that Rick is using Philippians 4 as his scripture for his series, because that is my go-to passage when dealing with anxiety and depression. The thing is, it says, in Philippians 4, don't worry about anything, instead pray about everything. So again, you just need to talk to God about what's going on. And God says, tell me what you need and thank me for what I've done. So God wants to know what's on your heart and what's troubling you, but he also wants you to thank him for what he's done. Because the thing is, when you come from a perspective of gratitude, it changes the way you look at things. And it helps give you a perspective of hope. And you need hope when you're being confronted with a lot of stressors. And it says, then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything you can understand. And his peace will guard your heart and your mind, your thoughts. So God's peace will guard our thoughts. And that's why it's so important to pay attention to what we're thinking. Because if we're thinking the things that God is telling us to think, it's going to give us peace. And it's going to help us to conquer the anxiety and the fear. And then it says, one final thing, fix your thoughts. So when you hear the term fix your thoughts, what I think of is kids who are playing video games, who are so tunnel visioned. You can jump in front of them, you can offer them food, you can scream and yell, and they literally cannot take their eye off the screen. That is the kind of tunnel vision that God is talking about. And he is saying, fix your thoughts on what is true, what is honorable, what is right, what is pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, worthy of praise. And God says, if you do all those things, if you fixate on those things, and that is all you're thinking about, you're going to drive out all the anxious thoughts that are telling you to feel scared and overwhelmed. And it's going to help produce peace. And that's just a very powerful thing, because it gives you tools that you can use to combat fear and anxiety. And you don't feel like you have to be at the mercy of what you're feeling. And so what I encourage people to do, if you're feeling scared, if you're feeling overwhelmed, go backwards. Ask yourself, what am I thinking that is making me feel this way? And is there anything that I am believing that maybe isn't based in truth? And if that's the case, how can I adjust my thinking so that everything else aligns the way that God wants it to?
That's good. That's so good. You know, I've got to think that in the same arena of anxiety is also just fear.
Yep.
And a lot of times we want to help our children face their fears. But yet we kind of get in this tension of, am I pushing too hard and it's actually, not helpful, or, you know what, I just want to wrap my child in bubble wrap and take away all their hardships.
Yeah.
So how do we balance that tension and what's appropriate?
No, I think that's a really good question, because I think as parents, our instinct is to want to take away the struggle for our kids. So we either do push them too hard just to get through it, or we do try to protect them. But the thing that I want to challenge you to think about is that both approaches do not empower our kids. Because if you push them too hard, they may shut down because they're overwhelmed. And if you protect them too much, then they don't have the confidence, and they don't believe you have the confidence that they can handle this. And so the thing is when we think about like when our kids learn how to walk, many times they fell down, but they had to get to a point, as much as we wanted to go over there and grab them and pick them up because we didn't want them to get hurt. We had to let them struggle through of picking themselves up so that they would get the confidence that if they fall down, they're going to be able to get back up until they can walk and walk well. And I think that's the thing we have to think about with our kids, no matter what age they are. Our kids are struggling to navigate these times, but we need to give them the tools to help them navigate it well. And we need to equip them with tools. And so it's not necessarily how hard do I push, but what tools do I have that I can give them that will help them pick themselves up when they do fall down from fear. And what that is resilience. We want our kids to have resilience. So the question should be, what can I do to help build resilience in my kids so that when they fall down, they have the confidence to get back up? And one of the really great things to do is to help them work through maybe the fears that they're having. If they are struggling with fear, it may be an easy response to say, you don't need to feel that way. Well, just don't think about that. Well, just don't worry about that. You need to be positive. When we say things like that, we basically invalidate how they're feeling, because if they are struggling with fear, it's real. And they need to be able to talk through those things. And so one of the best things that you can do is just be present with your kids. Ask them, tell me about what you're fearing. What is going on? Listen to them. Help them just process and communicate what's on their heart. And then validate. I understand why that would be scary. That would be scary for me if I were going through that. And help them feel normal. Help them feel empathized with, so that by doing so, you literally do help move them out of it. But if you dismiss it or try to distract them away from it, they get stuck in it. So one of the most powerful tools that you can give your kids is just being present when they're struggling, and help them walk through those emotions and get to the other side. And it goes back to the whole red zone, green zone. When they're overwhelmed with fear, they're in that red zone where they're shutting down and they're in a very reactive place where they're just wanting to get away from everything because they're overwhelmed. What you want to do is help them see that I understand that you're scared. It is hard to feel scared. There's some really hard things going on. I understand how hard this is, and I'm so sorry it's been so hard, and empathize with them. And then that just kind of brings them back down. And then all of a sudden you'll see them kind of in a place where they seem more receptive. And then that's when you problem solve with them. And so when they are in this really emotional place of just fear, anxiety, stress, just be present with them. Talk to them, listen to them, empathize with them. And then once you have done that and you have helped them move past that place where they were, then that's when you problem solve. What can we do to make this better for you?
That's so good. That's so good. Well, I mean, I want to touch on something else that you brought up earlier. And obviously electronics are good. I mean, we're utilizing them to be able to do this. And Taylor Walling even did a series on this. You know, who knows how long ago it was. COVID's messed up everybody's timeline, but I think over a year ago. But, you know, too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. And so I guess just in the realm of electronics, what advice would you give to parents?
Well, I agree that, you know, it's kind of like a love-hate relationship with electronics, because there's so much good in electronics, but there's also a lot of hard in electronics. And you know, through this whole pandemic, electronics and technology have been like a lifesaver for all of us. It's enabled us to do Facebook Live and for me to be able to do counseling online and to do remote schooling. I mean, it's been amazing the way that technology has been used. But what I have seen, though, is that we are getting to a point where technology is becoming a place that we hide and where we distract, and where we kind of shut down, where we withdraw from the world and go into our technology. And, you know, and there may be a place for that for short periods, but what I see and what I experience in talking to families all the time is that it's excessive and there's so much of it. And then one of the things also about it, and Rick touched on this in his sermon on Sunday, is the idea that with technology and with social media and all the things that are going on, we have this constant consumption of information. It never stops. You know, when you and I were younger and we maybe had a bad day at school, we would go home and we didn't have to deal with it again until the next day because maybe we didn't answer the phone or we didn't see our friends. But now our kids, when school is over, they're dealing with everything. They're dealing with friends texting them. They're dealing with the social media. They may have people dialoguing with them about everything going on. Like, kids can never get a break from everything that's going on. And then you have all the news, all the stuff with COVID and with the politics and the racial issues and just all the different things going on. And it's just like this constant influx of information. And it's not just information, it's stressful information. And it overwhelms our systems and we don't know how to cope with it. And then our kids are never detached from all of the drama that may be going on at school, drama that's going on with friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, all those different things. And so when you can never take a break, when you can never disconnect, it becomes a place that's not healthy. And it becomes a place that ends up hurting and not helping. And I think one of the things that I would encourage people to think about is when you're using your electronics and technology, why are you using it? Are you using it to FaceTime with a friend so that you can connect, which would be a good thing? Or are you using it to distract so you don't have to deal with things? Are you doing it so that you don't have to deal with your family or your friends or the stresses that are going on and it's keeping you from engaging life? If it's keeping you from engaging life, that's a red flag that maybe you need to find some different ways to connect in a different way and to cope in a different way. And I think another thing is that with social media, there's like kids are constantly being bombarded with images and perfection. And I see that a lot where people feel this pressure to perform and pressure to be a certain way that technology kind of forces on them because of social media and things like that. And that puts a pressure on us that just drives the anxiety up. And so I would just encourage all families just to maybe step back and see if there's a way to set limits on technology in a way that promotes more in-face interaction, and where when you're sitting at the table that no phones are allowed, or when you come home that phones are put away, or that kids are not allowed to go to bed with their phones, where they could be staying up all night, engaging in things and not getting the sleep they need and not being able to disconnect from maybe the stressors that are happening. It's just, the thing is that there needs to be limits on it. And it's a hard conversation and it's stuff that we love and we need, we think that we need, but the thing is there's a point where it's like candy. It tastes good, but after a while it stops being healthy for us.
We had a family friend tell us recently that you almost think of your electronics like a friend that's come over, and at some point it's time for them to go home. At some point it's time that they're not going to be in bed with them throughout the evening or anything like that. And so when you just think in those terms, it just starts to help with what those boundaries are and going, okay, we need to kind of shut this off. Yes. and you can reconnect tomorrow, but there is a limit that's good for that. So yeah. So we've talked a lot about students, a lot about our kiddos. But parents are hurting too.
Yes.
And so just in the midst of all this, what do you have advice for parents and their own mental health?
Yeah. I think the first thing I would say is be kind to yourself. This is really, really hard. And as parents, we are struggling daily trying to figure out how to navigate this. And we're also needing to help our kids navigate. And so there's this pressure that we feel to have it all together so that we can help our kids have it all together. And it feels overwhelming. And I talk to families every day who are so stressed out and so overwhelmed and so weary of this time and all of the pressures and all of the stresses. And it's a lot. And I just think it's really important as parents that we just step back and say to ourselves, you know what? This is really hard and this really is overwhelming and I'm doing the best that I can. And beating myself up is not going to help me get through this, and it's not going to help my kids get through this. And I really think, I can't tell you how many people I talk to who beat themselves up because they don't feel like they're handling things well. And none of us have ever dealt with this before. We're all trying to figure it out as we get through it. And so there just has to be grace with ourselves as we teach our kids to have grace with themselves. I think another thing is we need to find ways to take care of ourselves. Like, we are so good at taking care of everybody else and making sure our kids have everything that they need and making sure our kids get all the things that they need for support, but so often we neglect ourselves. And it's kind of like the idea when you fly on an airplane, and if the oxygen mask drops, they always say, if the oxygen mask drops, put it on yourself before you put it on the person beside you. And why is that? Because if you don't put the oxygen mask on yourself, you're going to pass out and you're not going to be worth anything to be able to help anybody else. And it's the same idea that we have to be able to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of our kiddos. And so we have to prioritize our needs just like we need to prioritize our kids' needs. So we have to see ourselves as part of the equation. And so self-care is a big piece of it. We have to find ways to take care of ourselves. We have to find ways to have fun and to laugh and to connect and to make sure that we are getting the connections that we need as we make sure our kids have all those connections. And so making sure that you are sleeping, making sure that you are eating okay, making sure that you are getting some exercise. Those things you need too. And another thing is that whole red zone, green zone, that is something that's helpful for you too, because we use this in our home all the time. If I'm in my red zone because I'm stressed out or I'm frustrated about something, I'll tell my kids, I'm in the red zone. Don't deal with me right now. And so they know
they go running the other way.
They do. And if Mama's on a rampage cleaning the house, they say, oh, Mama's in her red zone. Let's back away and let her have her space. And so the thing is if you're in that place where you feel like your emotions are kind of driving where you are and you're in that just very reactive place, find ways to get support for yourself so that you can decompress, so that you can get back down into the green zone, so that you can take care of yourself. And I just think it's just so important that you don't neglect what's going on with you. If you're really stressed out, if you're really overwhelmed, then do something to get the support that you need. Don't constantly take care of everybody else and forget that you have needs too. And I just think it's so important. It just breaks my heart how many families I talk to who are struggling and just tearing themselves down because they don't feel like they're managing this time well. And it's just so unfair that pressure is being placed on them, because the thing is that we're all struggling. We're all trying to figure it out. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're feeling stressed out, if you're feeling like you're struggling, first of all, just know so does everybody else. And there's not something wrong with you that's the way that you feel. It's just that we are dealing with overwhelming times right now. And so whatever is going on, just make sure you always stop and also assess how you're doing. And if you feel like you need something, then go get the help that you need. Go ask for the support that you need.
Yeah. So what I hear is it's okay not to be okay,
yes,
but not okay to stay there. And so go get some help. Throughout the night, you've talked about self-care a lot, and a proper diet, good exercise, getting some sleep. And so a question that we've gotten in this evening is from parents that are saying, we know it's important for our kids to get sleep, but when they are anxious and it is interrupting their sleep, how do you help them stay asleep? How do you help them get back to a sense of calm so that they can go back to sleep?
No, that is a really good question. I think one of the things, first of all, is if our kids are not dealing with their stress, if they're just holding it in, it's kind of like when I talk to kids, this is the way I use, the way that I describe it. It's like a can of soda that maybe we shake up and it looks perfect on the outside, but we know the pressure is building and building and building. And if you don't do something with that pressure, that Coke or that soda is going to explode on you. And so it's like we're the same way as people. We have all this pressure building and building and building. And if we don't do something, it's going to come out. And a lot of times it does come out as anxiety. And so many people, the anxiety comes out right at bedtime. And I think what I see with a lot of people is that they distract, so they don't have to deal with stuff. And then when they lay down and it's dark and they don't have any more distractions, they're flooded with all the things that are concerning them and stressing them. And so I think one of the things that needs to happen is dealing with some of the stress, dealing with some of those emotions, dealing with some of those fears away from bedtime, so that bedtime is not the only time our kids are having to face those things, and where they're having to be alone with those thoughts and they're scared and they're overwhelmed. So that's one thing. Another thing is going back to the whole thought process. If our kids are really afraid, it's because they're thinking scary things. And so when my kids have struggled with fearful times, like at bedtime, one of the things that I always do is just say, well, tell me what you're thinking about. What's telling you to be scared? And then when they start telling me, I'm like, well, no wonder you're afraid. If I were thinking those kinds of things, I would be scared too. And so we talk about what they're thinking about, and if there's something that could maybe be dealt with. But again, if you deal with these things away from bedtime, then bedtime is a place of peace. So I think one of the things that just needs to happen is you deal with some of the things that they're struggling with away from bedtime. But then some of the things that can help are just, spending time with them in prayer before they go to sleep, and helping them to pray for their thoughts and for those feelings, that God will just overwhelm them with just His peaceful truth. And then utilizing things like music or meditation, or just ways to help them just kind of decompress. But I think one of the things is that a lot of times our kids are watching TV shows up until bedtime, or they're on their electronics up until bedtime. Again, it's a type of distraction that is happening where they're not dealing with whatever is bothering them. And so as soon as they lay down, now they're being flooded with everything. So I just encourage you to start having these dialogues with your kids. Like, make it a normal part of your day of asking, how are you doing? On a scale from 1 to 10, how do you feel like you're doing with these things? And then figure out what it is that's stressing them. Are they being exposed to too much news, where they're worrying too much about the news? So maybe we need to turn the TV off. Or maybe we need to stop having discussions in front of our kids. Or are they worried about a friend or about their grades? Deal with it away from bedtime and help them process it, so that when bedtime comes, they're all clear. They don't have all that stuff just building up in them like that can of soda.
Yeah, that's good. All right, you got time for one more?
Yep.
All right, so we talked about kids that are struggling, but what about if a spouse is struggling? How can you help in a way that's helpful and not contributing to the anxiety?
Well, again, I think it's really important that when anybody that we know is struggling with anxiety or fear, that first of all, we just be present with them, that we listen to them, that we don't try to talk them out of how they're feeling. Because when you're struggling with fear or anxiety and you're overwhelmed with it, and then people are trying to talk you out of how you are feeling, well, you just don't need to think that way. Well, just distract yourself. Well, be more positive. When people say those kinds of things, it invalidates where you are, and it makes you feel even more alone. So now you're struggling with fear and feeling alone, and that just compounds it and makes it harder. And so one of the greatest things that you can do is just be present and empathize. And I understand that this is so hard, and I'm so sorry, and I'm here with you, and just be present with them. But then another thing is if you are concerned about your spouse or your kids, anybody, if you feel like they need something beyond what you feel like you're able to give them, then encourage them to seek out help, and to maybe talk to their doctor, or to seek out counseling, and to get the help that they need. But I just think it's just so much in our instinct to want to push what people are fearing away, so we can just release them from it. But you don't release them from it by telling them to not think about it or to dismiss what they're feeling. Be there with them, empathize with them, validate how hard it is, tell them that you're with them, that you want to support them, that you're with them, and that you're going to be with them to get through it.
Yeah, that's so good. And just, again, that constant communication and connection.
Yes.
As we wrap up tonight, Stephanie, I'm assuming we've got some resources for folks that you could, like, where can where can folks that are listening, where can they go to get some resources that'll help them?
Sure. So in our ministry, we have counseling available for people. You don't have to be a member at the Hill, so it's for members and non-members. Okay. And so if you feel like you need counseling, please reach out to us. You can go to thehills.org/counseling. And when you go down, you can scroll down and hit request an appointment, and it will take you both to my calendar and Steve Allison's calendar that will enable you to be able to schedule an appointment. Or you can call the church office and speak to Debbie Poss, our ministry coordinator, and she can answer any questions that you have about setting up counseling. So just know that that is available for you. Know that if you have insurance, we try to utilize your insurance. If you need financial assistance, please don't let finances be the reason you don't ask for help, because we have help available and we want to be a support. And also, if you go to our website, we have a bunch of resources on how to utilize different coping tools. And so just scroll down and look at that, and also look at, we have different support groups. And so just know that we are here to support. We're here to be there and walk with you through this time. So if you're struggling, just reach out to us. Just know that we're here and that we want to support you.
So I just want you to know that Kelly, Nicole, Frida, they've all texted in and said this has been so helpful to them, and especially to Stephanie, and just how overwhelming the times are. And so just thank you for being here this evening and just sharing the wisdom that God's given you. And then all of you that are tuned in tonight, thank you so much for being here. I would invite you to come and join us this weekend. Rick is going to do his fourth and final teaching in the Keep Calm series. And, he's used that word calm kind of as acrostic. Let's see if I've been paying attention. But C is come to Jesus. A is ask God for what you need. L is learn to be content. So that leaves us with M this weekend, and it's going to be mend your mind. Mm-hmm. And so again, ways that you can come and just be able to care, that self-care. We're to love our neighbor as we love ourselves. And that's going to be an opportunity to be able to do that really well by starting with ourselves this weekend, but it better positions us as we love others, just as Stephanie has told us tonight. So let me say a quick prayer and then just release you to the rest of your evening. But again, thank you so much for being here. But dear Heavenly Father, Lord, these are hard times. There's a lot of fear of the unknown and the what ifs. But what we know is that you are sitting on your throne, that Jesus has come and that he has died on the cross, and he has defeated death by walking out of the tomb. And we also know that one day you are coming back. And so, Lord, may we fix our mind on these things that are honorable and pleasing and true, just like Stephanie has told us throughout the evening. And as we do that, as we keep our eyes focused on you, then the things that are around us begin to fall into perspective. And we recognize that the spirit that lives within us is greater than he who is in the world, and we have our Father to help us not just walk through these times, but even excel during these times. So, Lord, please continue to be generous with your Spirit and his ministry of comfort to us, and may we also be a calming influence on not only those in our family, but those that you put in our paths. And we want to continue to be good ambassadors for you. We love you, and we pray all this in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen. Thank you again. Hope to see you soon. Blessings.